Hi everyone, Suzanne here. I hope you're all well and welcome to Sew Custom. Today's video is a patterning one, a little bit different to my previous patterning videos where I show how I created a specific design. This one is more a general technique, the slash and spread technique. I've showed this technique in a few previous videos. One, how I create my twist dresses. Two, how I create a flounce sleeve. And three, more generally, how I create a flounce pattern, all of which I shall link below. But I thought today it would be useful to show the technique more generally for those of you that are interested in patterning and also coming up with your own designs. So I'm going to show two examples of dresses that I've already sewed up on camera. Again, I shall link both of those videos below. So I'm not showing the exact patterns, but more the technique used, with the aim, as I say, of helping those of you interested in creating your own patterns. And then at the end of the video, I'll show some more examples of garments I've made using the same technique, but giving very different results. So if you're interested in seeing how I use the slash and spread technique, then let's get started.
So the starting point for these examples is my knit block. I've just made it half size so that it's easier for me to show the technique. So my first step is to trace the block. My paper underneath is on the fold. I'm making sure I'm adding in all of my markings. Drawing in my waistline, and now to add some length. This could be whatever length you wanted your dress to be. For me, it's 12 inches below the hip, marking in my hem and my side seam, and then transferring these markings through to the other side. So that's my tracing complete. So the next step is to create the actual pattern. So I want to have 5 slash lines emanating from a single point and going out towards the side seam. So I need to determine where I want that point to be. So for this one, the waistline seems appropriate. So I'm coming in on the waistline about 1/3 of its length, popping in my point, and then from there adding in my slash lines. So the first will end at the mid shoulder, the second the underarm point, the third is going to be my waist, which is already there, the fourth the hip line, and the fifth midway between the hip and the hem. So now that I have my lines all drawn in, I'm ready to spread. So I've just popped some fresh paper in underneath, and I'm slashing first of all through the waist to my dot, and then from there up the first slash line to the shoulder, giving myself a little hinge at the top, and then once I'm happy everything's nice and flat, sticking everything down. So now for the spread. So I'm measuring here 1 inch. That will give me quite a subtle spread. Again, making sure everything's lying nice and flat and sticking down. And then I'm just going to repeat that process for each of my slash lines. So slashing open, giving myself a little hinge, spreading by my 1 inch, making sure everything's lying nice and flat, and sticking everything down. So a couple of things I've learned by using this technique on various garments. Number one is the spread doesn't have to be even. So for this example, I'm spreading each of my slash lines by 1 inch. They could be spread by 3 inches, 4 inches, just whatever you want, dependent on your end design. Your starting point doesn't have to be 1/3 of the waist. It could be the center of the waist. It could be somewhere on a skirt. again just wherever you want. Where the slash lines finish is again completely up to you. It depends how evenly or unevenly spaced you want your gathers or your pleats to be in your final design. So that's all of my slash lines now spread. So I just want to close up where I'm pointing to here. So I'm running a smooth curve from the last slash line, touching the points of each to the first slash line. And then I have a couple of sets of notches that I need to put in. So the first set is just at the edge of the first and last slash line. The second is right in the center of the waist slash line. So I'm just measuring the midpoint here, popping in my notch, and then one on either side of that waist slash line. So that's my pattern slashed and spread. I have all my notches in place. So the last thing to do is to pop in my seam allowance. So I'm giving myself a 1 centimeter seam allowance the whole way around and a 1 inch hem allowance. So that's that done. And with that, this little pattern is complete. So I have my seam allowance and hem allowance in. I've got all my slash lines spread, got all of those notches in. So those of you that have watched the sewing up of this design will know that those notches accommodate a waist tie, which pulls all the gathers to that little point that we created and holds them in place. So that's an example of slashing and spreading from one single point. So for my next example, I'm going to slash and spread from different points. So I've traced my block and lengthened it in exactly the same way as I did before. And this time I want to create a two-piece pattern. So I want to give myself a little curve, just like you can see on the red dress, at the side seam. So I'm measuring above the waist 4 inches, below the waist 5 inches, and on the waist 4 inches. So I just want to join these dots, and I'm using my hip curve to do that. So just lining my ruler up with the waist dot and the side seam dot, top and bottom. So that's my little curved pattern piece now drawn. Now for my slash lines. So I'm just adding a little mark about 1 centimeter apart the whole way around this curve. These again don't have to be 1 centimeter apart. The number of slash lines here could be reduced or increased. Again, just personal preference. The original pattern for this dress was 4 pieces, so I had a little side panel just below my curve, which I joined both to the curve and the front of the dress, sandwiching in between a little flounce. If you wanted to have a go at something like the red dress, now would be the time to separate that panel. But for this example, I'm going to keep it really basic, 2 pieces. So now to draw in those slash lines. So I'm just lining my ruler up with the center of the shoulder seam and that first little notch. Second one with the neckline and the second notch. Third one near the center of the neck and the third notch. And I'm going to continue this the whole way around that curve. So that's all my lines drawn in. Now I want to separate my 2 pieces and spread those slash lines. So I've just popped some fresh paper underneath, and I'm first of all going to separate my little side panel from my front. I'm going to give myself a little notch just on the waistline on both pieces. And spread those lines. So just like before, slashing through the line, giving myself a little hinge, measuring the spread and sticking everything in place. Again, slashing through the line, giving myself a hinge, measuring my spread, making sure everything's nice and flat, and sticking everything in place. And I'm just going to repeat this process for all of my slash lines. So as I mentioned earlier, the spread doesn't have to be even on every slash line. So on this one, I'm starting with a small spread of 1 centimeter, the next one 1¼ centimeters, next one 1½, and I'm just continuing with that the whole way around. And I'm starting small here because I want the pleats at one end to be quite subtle. As they come round to the waist and across the hip, I want them to be a little bit more pronounced. So the smaller the spread, the more subtle the result will be. The greater the spread, the more pronounced. And again, you don't have to use my measurements here. I've played about with the amount of spread, with the placement of the slash lines on various designs, and I find that each one is different dependent on the end look I'm going for. So that's all of my slash line spread, and I want to create pleats on this pattern. So I want a little notch at either side of the pleat. So I'm just marking here both sides of the spread lines the whole way around that curve. Marking in my waistline notch, just like I did on the previous example. So measuring the spread at the waist and popping a notch right at the center. And now to give myself a nice smooth curve there. So again, just like before, I'm just joining each of my slash lines along that edge, making sure it's nice and smooth. So now that that's done, I'm ready to add my seam allowance to both pieces. So I've given myself a 1 centimeter seam allowance on both pieces and a 1 inch hem allowance on the dress. And for those of you that haven't seen the sewing up video of this design, I'm just using those notches to fold my pleats into place, and then I'll join it to that little side panel, just like you can see here. So that's my second slash and spread example, where I've spread from multiple points rather than one. And hopefully you can see from this side-by-side picture that using the same method, just in a slightly different way, gives very different results.
So at the start of the video, I said I would show some more examples of garments I've made using exactly the same technique. And this first one is one of my twist dresses. So the twist here is at the bust, and then it has a couple of little extension pieces that are joined to the side seam under the bust. So the method used here is exactly the same as the very first example I showed. It's just the dot that I placed at the very start of the patterning is at the center front, just under the bust. And then when I've opened up my pattern, I've just given myself an extension in order to create the twist and that little under bust portion. And then the second example is another twist design with extension. Just this time, the starting dot is at the bust and the extension is up around the neck. And you can see this in a lot more detail if you watch the patterning video of this one, which I shall link below. So for both the polka dot, the red dress and my two twist dresses, my starting point has been the knit block. For these next examples, my starting point has been the woven or darted block. So this one has a crossover detail at the neck, and to achieve that, all I've done is pivoted the shoulder dart to the center front at the neck. I then slashed open that dart, gave myself an extension just like the twist dress before, and then crossed both of those extension pieces at the neck, which create these gorgeous folds in the fabric. This next one was my little red dress with princess seams, and I've used the slash and spread method in two areas on this dress. Firstly, I've sandwiched in between the princess seams over the shoulder a flounce, and then at the hem I've just opened it up to give me a nice bit of flare there. And then this one was my autumn midi dress I made last year. And I've used the technique below the knee around the hem. So I've just separated the amount of hem that I wanted for this design and then just opened up that bottom piece on front and back. And then similarly on my wrap dress, I've done exactly the same thing on the hem as I did in the previous example, but I've also used the slash and spread method at the bottom of the sleeves. So I've just given myself a little flounce there. And then this one is the same dress again, I've just changed up the sleeves. So the bottom is exactly as the previous example, but instead of having straight sleeves with a little flounce at the bottom, I've just given myself full-on flounce sleeves. And then the last example I have to show today is the top I'm actually wearing. So this is my little kimono style wrap top, and I used the slash and spread method in order to open up below the waist, so to give myself this little peplum. So hopefully what this video is showing is that you can use the same technique, just slightly tweaked for each variation, and you can come up with many designs. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, please do, and I shall see you guys in my next one. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. Bye folks!